Our brains are not wired to remember numbers. They're wired to remember stories. What is it that motivates us as humans to action? It's empathy. It's understanding someone and then wanting to do something about it. When we tell our stories, what's the most important part of the story? Hint, it's the conflict. Think of your favorite book or TV show or movie. What is it that really drives the storyline? It's conflict. And so we need to understand what the consumer conflict is and then how our brand overcomes, helps the protagonist who we have empathy for, the hero or the heroine of the story. How does our brand help them overcome that conflict?
Today on Customerland, Brett Townsend, who's SVP of Strategy at Questor. And we're going to get into to what Questor is and does in a little bit. I'll ask Brett for a better description than I could certainly give. But first of all, Brett, thanks for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike. I'm happy to be here.
So a couple things just to kind of set context for this conversation. Brett is co-author with president of Questor, a guy named Tim Hoskins, on a new book called Insights on the Brink, which is a really, really interesting series of takes on what's happening in the insights industry, good and bad, and what can be done to fix the bad and amplify the good. And I'm dying to get into that because as Brett and I were just talking about a minute ago, I have some opinions. I'm interested to see whether any of them are any good. So this should be a good conversation. So Brett, maybe just again for context, tell us a little bit about what Questor is and your role there.
Sure. Questor is a brand and innovation consultancy firm where we work with really strategic-minded people on mainly brand building, consulting, using insights as the backbone for that strategy. But we don't really call ourselves a full service supplier or anything like that, because it's not about doing research. It's about really developing and creating strategy and then consulting around that. So we work with brands, big and small, all different types of work. And my role is really in a strategic position, not just to help develop more of that competency for Questor, but to work in that strategic component with our clients because of my 15-year corporate career and having been at some of those high levels within insights and marketing and strategy, to be able to help consult our clients on not just what type of work to do, but what to do with it when you have it. How do you seed it within an organization? How do you work cross-functionally? How do you sell it up into senior management? A lot of those types of things that I've learned over the course of my career.
So in looking over your site and some of the materials that your team sent over, even though that the book is clearly about the insights industry, and even though your background has a lot to do with the insights industry, it was interesting to me that Questor's approach to go-to-market strategies to strategy overall has an insights component, a strong insights, but that's not really all the company seems to be about. It seems to be about a kind of a much broader, more holistic approach.
And that's very purposeful. I was a client of Questor's for 12 years, going back to my early days at PepsiCo. And then when I decided I was going to leave the corporate side, it was never a question of really where I wanted to go. I wanted to come and work with Questor just because of that. They were one of my favorite agencies to work with because it was a very holistic, big picture strategy type thinking, not just doing projects for me. And so it's a very natural fit for the way I believe. And kind of as we segue into the book, I mean, it's we walk the walk. We live the principles of the book in developing the kind of evolutionary strategy in the way that we feel the industry needs to be going.
So I hope you'll take this comment the right way, because you could certainly take it the wrong way. But especially in this political environment, everybody's got a memoir that's trashing what could have been or should have been. Mm-hmm. And And I'll be really honest with you. I saw the early kind of messaging on the book Insights on the Brink, and I thought, well, here we go. As people looking back on, on their careers going, well, what could have, should have, might have been, except for, only to find out that's really not the case at all. It's really about from people who are actively working in the industry and have led certain aspects of this industry. So I would say it's a much more active approach than a look back. Having said that, what what were the factors that caused you to want to spend the time and energy, and it's significant, to write a book like this?
Yeah, it was based on a keynote address that I gave back in 2019 that I had a lot of people tell me, hey, you ought to blow that out and turn it into something and even perhaps write a book about it because it's things that the industry needs to hear. And it's just simply based on mine and Tim's over 20 plus years each experience in this industry and where we see it is, where we see it could go, what are the things that are holding it back. And it really is kind of a passion project from two people who love this industry, who want to see it in the place that it deserves. Just realizing that there are a few things holding us back that go back decades and that for some reason we're just holding on to. Some people don't even realize what we're doing, but just we wanted it to spark conversations mostly within the industry about how we can evolve and that we need to evolve because we're seeing insights being marginalized in a lot of big companies around the world because senior executives either don't think it's effective or the insights or departments are focusing on the wrong things. And consumer insights can be incredibly powerful. They're behind the greatest product and marketing creations that we've ever seen. But when we get too far away from really what we should be doing, and we think that we're in this just doing work, doing research, working on methodologies, that's when we start to lose our way. And so that's really why we wanted to do this. As you said, working practitioners that want to see the insights community kind of take the place that it deserves.
Yeah, I would add to that a lot of times the insights work you can't find a direct ROI. You can find some very definite indirect ROI, but sometimes tracing the success of a brand or a brand launch or a new product or new service right back to the insights, knowing that there's a lot of other of links in the chain from insights into into the market space. Sometimes it gets a little lost there. And I know because I've seen it and I've certainly experienced it myself is, when it's budget cut time, when it's that part of the cyclical environment your industry's in, the first things to go are ad budget, followed almost immediately by insights,
Mm-hmm.
followed by anything related to marketing that doesn't have a direct ROI impact. And they just keep chopping down the road like that. So, um, finding those direct ROIs, or at least creating a narrative where the ROI can be attributed, is going to be an interesting thing to kind of meet out with you. Can you elaborate on some of those things? You named them as hurdles, things that the industry needs to overcome that it isn't right now, or isn't positioned to, or isn't thinking about. What are those things specifically?
Well, you know what? Let's start with that comment that you just made. I think the fact that insights traditionally has been so focused on doing research that we don't take the time to really show how valuable our work is. Like we're helping our marketing teams market our brands, but we're terrible at marketing our own work. And it's not easy, but it's absolutely possible that we can directly trace great insights work to the success of a product or a marketing campaign or things. And it's once you start to be able to track that, it becomes much easier and much easier to show ROI. And I think that's one of the reasons, to your point, that insights is one of the first things that gets cut is that we haven't really established ourselves as working dollars, as something that is contributing to sales. We're basically non-working dollars. We're a cost center in the eyes of a lot of people. We're really, when insights is done very well, it is a contributor to revenue. And I think that's one of the main hurdles, is that how do we view what we do? We insights professionals talk about our industry in terms of the work we do, not what we should be focusing on, which is making companies money, period. I mean, that should be the number one focus. I think another hurdle is that we are too focused on the dogma of methodology. Our industry was founded by clinicians and academics going all the way back to the 1930s. And a lot of the methodologies that they used back then are still in use today in a far different business climate than when they were developed. And so we think that methodologies are what we do, when really we're here to solve problems and answer questions that end up making companies money. So I think those are just some of the really low hurdles, but for some reason we keep tripping over them a lot. And then I think the final hurdle is to realize what truly is consumer insight and what is data. We confuse data with insight. We have so much data, we have so much information, but a lot of companies don't have great insight, great human empathy, great consumer understanding. We don't have that. We just have mounds of data, and we don't know how to tell stories from it or interpret it, and it's definitely not an insight. So I think when you talk about, we've got a number of hurdles that we talk about in the book, but I think those are the main ones. And if we can just overcome those and start to evolve past that, it's going to set our industry up so much better for the future.
A groundswell starts small, quietly building into something powerful, unstoppable. That's also how market momentum works. If you're launching a startup, introducing a new product, rebranding, or rolling out a new service or initiative, it's not enough to simply show up. You need to build momentum strategically. Specializing in go-to-market strategy, Groundswell works with organizations at every stage, creating custom plans that help products and brands break through the noise and grow, ensuring a launch that doesn't just happen, it sticks. From understanding your target audience to perfecting your positioning, Groundswell's approach ensures you're not just catching the market's attention, but keeping it. With expert guidance, your product moves from launch day to long-term success, turning that initial wave of excitement into sustained growth. If you're ready to take your product, service, or brand to market, it might be time to think about a Groundswell strategy. Visit groundswell.cc to learn more. I'm thinking right now, I've got a couple of close friends who are in the insights industry, and I've watched their careers. Both these people I'm thinking are very successful in that world, but their departments respectively have been shuffled around in the org chart a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been really interesting to see. I come from a marketing and creative background, and I know for me, having the insights people, that proximity to what I was working on, the direct interactions with insights people, affected and informed everything I was doing really nicely, I would say, which is a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, that's a really natural kind of location within the org chart. On the other hand, over the past, 3 or 4 years, whatever that period has been since I've been watching this stuff, I've seen insights departments get moved to under strategy,
Mm-hmm.
which could make some sense. I think it makes lots of sense. I've seen them pulled out of strategy and kind of made a part of marketing. And then I've also seen insights groups kind of pulled out of marketing and just kind of bolted onto sales. And so it sort of seemed to me, and this was actually one company, that they recognized some sort of value that the group was providing, but we're not really able to figure out its most natural home, where it could best benefit the organization overall. And I don't know if that's unique. You might have a better view to that than I do, But just watching these couple of people go, okay, now I'm part of sales, and I have to, I have to kind of change my remit, as it were. Like, here's what I do. The core functions of what I do are kind of the same, but now I have to kind of, what's the right word here?
Serve a different
Basically,
master.
serve a different master and
Hmm.
create a different kind of storyline that tells the value of what I do, or something like that. Does that make any
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, it does. And I've even seen consumer insights group under product development as well. So it depends on the philosophy of the company where they feel the most value is. Now that is a little unique for one company to move around their insights department as much as your friends, but and that just shows that leadership doesn't really, they, like you said, they see value, but they don't quite know the value yet, or they don't, or they think there's a value but they haven't quite seen it, and so they're trying to find the right place for it. And so, a lot of people in our industry will blame senior leadership for something like that. And I think one of the tones of the book is that, what, we need to look inward, and it's real lazy to blame other people. And when you talk about, you go to a relationship therapist and they'll say, you change yourself before you can worry, because you can't change your partner. And I think that's really a lot of the tone of the book, is that, if our opinion, you know, is that if insights was really showing their value, if they were really developing, if they were showing their ROI, if they were really developing insight that led to sales, there wouldn't be that kind of shuffling around, because their value would be evident. And I think the message, though, to senior leadership is that you don't have to keep moving it around to find the value, because really consumer insights works cross functionally with more departments than anyone else in a company. They work with marketing, with sales, with product development, with post purchase customer service, with a lot of different areas where other parts of the company don't work as cross functionally as they do. And so it doesn't really matter where you place them. It really matters on what you demand from them and what you expect from them. And that is, we need actionable insights that lead to making money, whether that's developing products, developing messaging, helping our sales team sell in the product. It doesn't matter. And everybody should love insights. Everybody should want to work with insights, like you, and like you said with your partner, like you saw that value. And consumer insights should have no natural predators, basically.
Right, right.
But
Um,
we do, and we become the threat to our own existence because of the way that we've operated.
it reminds me a little bit, and I do think there are some parallels here to the CX world,
Oh,
which
definitely.
is an invaluable component of any company's, especially a consumer-oriented company's efforts to gain and retain customers. But it's not much like the insights functions. It's often seen as a cost center. They recognize the cross-functionally cross-functional value, but the CX leaders are also kind of getting shuffled around the org chart because hasn't found the right home. It almost seems like, there needs to be a kind of new category within the org chart that just describes cross-functional services, that it's not really a spot within the org chart. It's something that is more intertwined. I don't know. Let's not get into that because I really don't know what I'm talking about there. Um, but if we can, let's talk a little bit about some of the ways that insights professionals, insights groups can start to overcome some of these things.
Sure. So I think it really is a mindset shift, is the first part of what really we focus on. The mindset shift of, I am here to make this company money. Period. I'm not here to do projects. I'm not here to be a methodology expert. I'm not here to gather data. I'm not here to talk to consumers. I am here to make the company money. So once you have that, then it really kind of cascades down from there. The second thing, the second mind, mindset shift, there we go, is to is to is to not focus so much on methodology. And again, that is something that's been passed down from our forefathers for decades, is that we're here to, solve problems, answer questions, develop products, tell great stories, develop consumer empathy for the humans that we serve, find solutions because of that empathy that we have. We're not doing methodology. And so when we think that methodology is the most important thing, then it kind of just puts us in this dogma of just doing work rather than looking at that bigger picture and saying, let's really figure out what we're trying to solve here and not really start with the methodology, but end with the methodology. And then I think there's a lot of things in the book, and I want to kind of keep these answers short and concise. I think the other thing too is just realize about how we present. A lot of times we get a report back from a project that we do, and it's one report, and we deliver it to everybody. And we have to realize that our cross-functional partners don't need to know everything. Like there's a saying that I have in the book where it says, I don't need to know everything you know. I just need to know what I need to know. And I would tell my agencies that when I was on the corporate side. And then the further up the ladder I went, the more that became true. My CMO didn't need to know everything I know. The CEO definitely didn't need to know everything I
Right.
know. One of my favorite experiences was when I was at Frito-Lay. Al Carey, who was the CEO of Frito-Lay at the time, told a few of us in Insights, he says, if you can't tell me your story in 3 slides, you don't have a story. And it wasn't cram as much junk on 3 slides as you could, but it was like, be concise when you come and talk to me. Tell me what the insight is and what I need to go do about it. And so I think just tailoring our presentations to our audience will do a tremendous amount of good for us as far as communicating the right message to the right people.
You've mentioned this a couple times already in this conversation, but the idea that data is storytelling, or that insights folks could really benefit from understanding how to build stories out of the data. Those are my words, not yours, but the idea
Yep.
is there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a huge believer in that. I absolutely believe it. I think people form opinions and feelings based on narratives. That's why
Absolutely.
storytelling is so powerful. But how do you tell somebody, a group of professionals who may be all about the methodology and may be dogmatists, and to say, your value is in a different construct of what you do?
We've had this conversation with some people, and my first question, it was kind of like Ronald Reagan when he was, running against Jimmy Carter. That's a very dated example, but he's like, "How's that worked for you? Are you better off now than you were before?" And
Right.
and the answer is always no. And they're like, "How has that worked for you?" When you're up there presenting methodology and presenting numbers, how has that worked for you? Do you get a lot of people asking a lot of questions because they don't know what you're talking about? Do things not get actioned upon? Are you moving the needle anywhere? And the answer is usually no. And so I think and we just it's a process. We talk to people that our brains are not wired to remember numbers. They're wired to remember stories. What is it that motivates us as humans to action? It's empathy. It's understanding someone and then wanting to do something about it. When we tell our stories, what's the most important part of the story? Hint, it's the conflict. Think of your favorite book or TV show or movie. What is it that really drives the storyline? It's conflict. And so we need to understand what the consumer conflict is, and then how our brand overcomes, helps the protagonist, who we have empathy for, the hero or the heroine of the story. How does our brand help them overcome that conflict? And it's the elements are there. It's not as if people in the insights industry are doing it all wrong or just like completely backwards and have to do a total 180. It's just a reframing of what we do and a refocusing on, okay, I'm not here to present numbers or do research. I'm here to tell empathetic stories that deliver revenue. And the elements are all there. It's just, how do we go about doing it?
I'd love to sit in on one of your strategy sessions as you're talking to these people about this reframed mindset, because I know firsthand, again, because of my background, and I would say in some level I'm a storyteller because I needed to be.
So
Um,
you're a marketer. You are a storyteller for sure.
I got better at it when I started factoring in actual data there and insights. But you know, watching people kind of reconfigure their mindsets is always an interesting process. As light bulbs start to go off in the room, and they say, "Oh, wait a second, this isn't me changing what I do. It's simply changing how I tell the story about what I do."
And
It's pretty powerful.
yeah, and there's an example that I included in the book that I'll just briefly tell you is like when I was at PepsiCo, I had a global role for a couple of years and went over to Europe and met with one of the marketing insights leads of a country, and I was there for another reason, but she was really distressed kind of when I got there, and I said, "Hey, what's going on?" And she said, "Well, I just had a meeting with our GM of the country, and it didn't go well, and he didn't do anything that we recommended." And I said, "Well, why don't you show me your presentation and what you showed him?" And as she went through it, it was just all data. It was just all charts. And so I just started asking her, "What did you actually tell him to do? What was the actual recommendation you made? What was the story you were telling?" And as she went through it, she's like, "Oh my gosh, I really didn't tell him to do anything." And I said, "Okay, so let's turn it off for a second." I said, "Just talk to me. Don't show me slides or anything else. Just talk to me. What did you learn from this? What is the action? What's the story behind all this?" And so as she started telling me all this, I said, "Okay, that's your presentation." I said, "You know what? Before we start on the reason why I'm even here in the first place, go and get another appointment with him, and ask him if you can represent." And so she went, got another appointment, and then we spent the next couple of hours with her team going through and rebuilding that presentation. And all of the information was there. It just needed to be reorganized and retold in a way that worked. So then 2 days later, she represents it totally clear as day. GM says, "This is great. I agree with you. Let's move forward." And it really wasn't that they hadn't done their job collecting the information. It was just how they told it. So that was a really great experience that I had of what you just said, of just reframing, rethinking, and then realizing, oh, this is what works. This is what they want to see. And then I remember getting emails later down the road saying, "We do that now with every presentation. That's made such a difference." It's just one little change of how you look at things.
It's storytelling 101
Yep.
applied to some serious insights. I love it. I love it. One of the things that occurred to me as I was thinking about this conversation over the prior couple of days here is that, especially after I read the first couple of chapters of the book, is I think you frame up, and I hope I'm not misspeaking here. I think you're framing up the industry as, um, in a kind of a dangerous spot. The the companies that own these insights groups may not see the value long term, and there's some danger in that. You're expendable if that's really the way you're seen. And in my own world, I can tell you that what I do for a living hasn't really changed a whole lot in a long time. I mean, it's different flavors of the same thing, but what it's called now is something different than what it was called 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or you know, go back further because you could in my case. Um, and it's almost not entirely, but it's almost entirely a function of how you describe yourself. um and I'm thinking of concepts like, especially if I'm an insights professional and I'm feeling undervalued, uh how do I start describing what I do at its essence? And I'm thinking of, um you know you are very much branding experts, just based on what you understand about how your consumers are responding to you and the marketplace. You're very much go-to-market experts, although you may not have the channel expertise. Everything that goes into defining those channels and what goes out into them, is derived directly from what you're doing. And, it, and I think like what you said, it's about attaching yourself narratively to a direct ROI, to the fact that you're making sales happen. And whatever the language of the moment seems to dictate is something worth looking at. I just to extend this a little bit further, I
Mm-hmm.
can remember I was at an event, oh gosh, probably 7 years ago. It was a loyalty event. And there was kind of a mock debate, but it wasn't really a mock debate that they set up about CX versus loyalty. They were both at this kind of stage in their growth curve. And the question was, which one will assume and overtake the other? Is it going to be a loyalty world and CX fits underneath it, or is it going to be a CX world and loyalty fits underneath of it? And the mock debate was great fun, but it was only mock in the sense that nobody really wanted to ask it as a serious question. And and in the end, if you look back, or look ahead now, 7 years or whatever it is in the future, they're very distinct with entirely different vocabularies describing them. But at one point, that's just the way you needed to think about how these two entities operated. And I just wonder if is it really just a matter of the language we're using? It's a question more than an answer.
It's less of the language we're using, I think, and more of the emphasis or the focus of the company. So this is where I will say that senior leadership's job and something that I feel is their responsibility is to set a consumer centric culture throughout the organization to make the entire organization responsible for the consumer and not just consumer insights and maybe a little bit to marketing. I mean, Jeff Bezos to me is the greatest example of this because he said from the very beginning, we are customer obsessed. Everything we do is going to focus on the customer. And the thing is, that doesn't sound great in an earnings call for most people because you can't, in many cases, attach a financial number to it. And investors don't really want to hear that. But it started at Amazon from the top. And there's other companies that we know have that have done this very thing. But Jeff Bezos was very public with his statement about how customer obsessed they are, and it started with him. This consumer centric culture within Amazon, and so your whole thing about should loyalty be under CX or vice versa, that's just business semantics. That really doesn't matter who is under who or whatever. I mean, the whole thing is consumer insights, whether it's CX or loyalty or anything else. It's all understanding the consumer and how do you take that empathy that you have for them and turn it into solutions. It's not being product centric, it's being consumer centric. It's not, hey, what's the best product for the customer? It's what's the best solution for the customer. It's all these different things, but it has to start at the top. And because we've seen both, where there's some really great CI professionals that try to set that culture, but if it's not within the organization, they're just banging their heads against the wall. Whereas we've seen it from the top down where it absolutely works because it's mandated. It's like everybody's going to be in charge. And so it's a matter of, but yet we have to be leaders. You talked about where we fall and the problems that are happening with that. And I think it's to your point, we've always focused so much on what we do and not what we can be or who we are. We talk about how we do research, we do analytics, and it's really about and what we can be has nothing to do with methodologies or
Right,
processes,
right.
but it has everything to do with being leaders, no matter what our job title is. And so that's really what it's about. We have to develop that great business acumen. We have to know our business, not just consumer insights, but know marketing and supply chain and product development. And we have to understand how what we are doing impacts the entire organization. And so if we stay in our little research silo, we're never going to be a leader, no matter how good the research is, because we don't understand how it works within a business context. And so that's one of the things that we talk about is, developing business acumen, really kind of looking at yourself on what we are and what we can be and not just what we do.
it reminds me of this great saying. You were talking about your CEO at one point sitting you down and saying, if you can't boil it down to 3 slides,
Hmm.
and what an invaluable lesson that's been for you. This one was something I had to chew on for a little bit. It was a guy who ran actually a huge nonprofit at the time, and was sitting there meeting with him about some of the things that me and my group were working on for him. And he said, essentially, what I think you're saying is, I need you to stop focusing on outputs and start focusing on outcomes.
Absolutely.
And
Because what's happening is that CEOs are outsourcing insights because they're not getting outcomes from their insights people. They're getting research and data. And so they're going to BCG and Bain and some of the big consulting firms because they're focused on outcomes. And guess what? Those firms are hiring market research firms to do the market research
right,
part of
yeah,
it, to basically do that job. And so that's it. It is all about outcomes. You're absolutely right.
well, Brett, this is the beginning, I hope, of a series of conversations on a fascinating topic about let's just I'll repackage this and say it's not so much about what's wrong with the market research world, but it's about understanding the value that market research and consumer insights can bring into the broader effects of the company. But just to reiterate, Insights on the Brink, uh, co-authored by Brett Townsend and Tim Hoskins of Quester. I'll have a link to that below the podcast. But thank you, and I hope we can do this again because
Oh,
this is
I
great
would love
stuff.
to. I would love to. Thanks, Mike, for having me.